What is up, boyos, and welcome to Last Week in Games, where everything is video games. And today I am joined by nobody. We are talking about the week of September 25th, and there was quite a bit of news last week, so let's jump right into it.
And let's just jump into it. 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 Let's just jump into it.
Well, let's start with a couple smaller things. These are what we lovingly call the titties. These are some tidbits of news that we feel are worth mentioning. And we have two titties here that I'd like to mention. And the first one is City Skylines 2, which is coming out October 28th on PC. Its console edition has been delayed until spring of 2024. To me, I'm more surprised that City Skylines was announced for console day and date with the PC version to begin with. Releasing a game like City Skylines, which is definitely designed to be played with a mouse and keyboard, when you release a game like that on console, like, you have to make a lot of changes to it. You have to, first of all, kind of work within the limitations of the systems that you're porting the game to, as well as just figuring out how to make the game work with a controller. That doesn't totally suck. You know, there has been many versions of like SimCity that have come out on console that are nearly unplayable because of the controls, but I will say I have played the original City Skylines on console, and it's not terrible. It's not terrible. It's definitely still better on PC, but it's definitely doable on controller if you only have like a PlayStation or a Series X or something like that. So the fact that they're delaying it, not really a surprise to me. Like I said, I was more surprised that it originally had a day and date release with the PC version. Speaking of PC versions, Horizon Forbidden West has a PC port coming in early 2024. This was announced the same time that they announced that next week we are getting a Horizon Forbidden West Complete Edition, which I'm sure includes all the DLC and stuff. So if you're interested in that, there you go. And this game already looks amazing on PS5. I can't imagine what it's going to look like on beefy PCs. I'm sure it's going to look wonderful. One of my main things with Horizon Forbidden West was the fact that there was like a performance mode and a graphics mode. And when you played in the graphics mode, it really did stutter quite a bit. So I imagine playing it on PC, you could ramp up those numbers, get the graphics looking amazing, as well as the frame rates looking impeccable. So that's definitely something to look out for. Horizon Forbidden West, not my favorite game of all time, but definitely super good. Although I will say this about Horizon Forbidden West coming out on PC. Horizon Zero Dawn, when it came out on PC, did have a lot of troubles. I have heard since then they have patched it all, gotten it running really nicely on PC now. But when it first came out, it did have quite a bit of issues. So maybe something to wait and see as far as what reviewers say. Well, let's hop into the big pieces of news here. This was one of the biggest pieces of news of last week, and just super fascinating that we're seeing this. Sony seemingly removes most traces of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake from the internet. This comes from Wesley LeBlanc over at Game Informer. Sony kicked off a September 2021 PlayStation showcase by formally revealing a rumored remake of the classic RPG, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, for PlayStation 5. That was the last we heard of it, except for a Bloomberg report the following year that stated the project was on indefinite development hold as a result of major staff departures. Now it seems Sony and PlayStation are removing most traces of KOTOR Remake, deleting tweets, and hiding the reveal trailer on its YouTube channel, as reported by Kotaku. Yesterday, on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, user Tricolor Chewtoy posted that the 2021 PlayStation Showcase KOTOR Remake reveal trailer had been recently delisted that same day. Twitter user Crusader2Elesser posted the same thing, noting, however, that in the full 2021 PlayStation Showcase video, the KOTOR remake trailer remained. With some more digging, Crusader 2 Elaser found that PlayStation had seemingly deleted every tweet mentioning the remake, save for the one below that also mentions other games. So there's a tweet here sort of talking about like God of War remake, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So those tweets still exist, but not the tweets just strictly about Knights of the Old Republic. Furthermore, with some Wayback Machine tinkering, they learned that a 2022 snapshot of PlayStation's Twitter showed that a different tweet exclusively about KOTOR remake still existed, meaning its deletion happened between last year and now. Game Informer has reached out to Sony and PlayStation about the hidden trailer and deleted tweets, and will update this story if comment or statement is received. Well, we do have an update here. This is an update. A spokesperson for Sony sent Kotaku a statement regarding the delisted Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic reveal trailer, stating it was due to licensing issues. Here's what Sony told Kotaku. Quote, as part of normal business, we delist assets with licensed music when the license expires. That sounds like some tomfoolery to me. That may be true. Like, you know, maybe the license for the music that was in the KOTOR remake did get delisted. But why would they let that happen? Why would they lose the licensing rights to this game if the game was still in full development? If they were still planning on releasing this game as it was shown back in the 2021 presentation? There's only one reason that would happen, and it's because they're moving away from the KOTOR remake. I don't know how I feel about that. You know, KOTOR is one of those games that everybody loves, everyone fondly remembers, and I think the problem with the KOTOR remake was that they were trying to make it a more actiony sort of game. But KOTOR was never an actiony kind of game like that. It was more of like a Baldur's Gate type game. It was a turn-based game. So trying to take that formula and turn it into this more like actiony Jedi Survivor type thing, I just don't feel was ever going to work the way they were hoping it to work. And also not what people wanted. And I think with games like Baldur's Gate coming out, it kind of proves that people are interested in these turn-based type games as long as they're good and have depth and something going on. I mean, look at Persona 5, huge success for Sega Atlas. And how cool would it be if Sony tagged Larian Studios? You know, they just released Baldur's Gate. Who knows what they're working on now? Maybe Sony was like, hey, you want to come over and make the KOTOR remake? I think the other issue is that we just keep ballooning these projects to be these massive, massive, massive things with the budgets through the roof. And when these budgets are through the roof, of course, you're going to get studio interference where the studios are saying, we're not liking where this is at. We're not liking how this is looking. And this is our dollar. And if we don't like how it looks, it's not going to happen. Now, if the game had a smaller budget made by Larian, a still sizable budget, it would still need a sizable budget. It is a Star Wars game after all. But if it had a reasonable budget, not so much studio interference, we could get a great KOTOR remake by like Larian Studios. It doesn't have to be Larian, but like that would be amazing. Just do KOTOR again. Don't try to change it too much. Make it modern, but keep the essence alive. Turning it into like an action game doesn't make a lot of sense. All right, let's get into the next piece of news here. And this is a sad piece of news, but something we see all too often in the gaming industry. Epic Games has laid off over 800 employees. This comes to us from Marcus Stewart at Game Informer. Epic Games has announced it is laying off roughly 16% of its workforce, resulting in around 830 employees losing their jobs. In a statement posted by Epic president Tim Sweeney, he explains the layoffs as a cost-cutting measure That will include divesting Bandcamp, which it acquired last year, and spinning off advertising platform Super Awesome into an independent company. Epic had acquired Super Awesome in 2020. 250 people will be leaving Epic as a result of these divestitures. Quote, "For a while now, we've been spending way more money than we earn, investing in the next evolution of Epic and growing Fortnite as a metaverse-inspired ecosystem for creators," Sweeney writes in his statement. "I had long been optimistic that we could power through this transition without layoffs, but in retrospect, I see that this was unrealistic," end quote. Sweeney then explains that despite taking steps to reduce costs, such as scaling back on marketing and events, Epic still fell short of achieving financial stability and that layoffs were the only solution. Sweeney states that that 2/3 of the terminations come from teams outside of the core development, and that these departures will not come at the expense of game development or lines of business. Sweeney also says that this will be the only round of layoffs and that Epic will still be hiring for, quote, critical roles. Development of content for titles such as Fortnite, Fall Guys, and Rocket League will continue as planned. Impacted employees will receive severance packages of 6 months of base pay and 6 months of Epic paid healthcare for workers based in the US, Canada, and Brazil. Epic will offer workers the option to accelerate stock options vesting schedules through the end of 2024, while adding 2 extra years from today to use these options. U.S. employees can also vest any unearned profit sharing from their 401k. Lastly, Epic will provide career transition service and visa support. Well, I feel like that's the least they could do, right? Is all that stuff. So, I mean, at least they're getting like severance packages and stuff like that. But I will say it's really messed up that they're at an all-time high as far as profit margins right now. And for them to just let go of 830 employees in the middle of all-time highs is just baffling to me. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about last week with Microsoft trying to buy everything, right? We've seen the same thing happening with Epic. Epic buys Bandcamp, but then what does Epic do with Bandcamp? They fire everyone at Bandcamp and dissolve it. And this is what I was saying about Activision Blizzard last week with Xbox buying it. Sure, we'll see Call of Duty and stuff like that. But what happens to Toys for Bob or other smaller studios like that? They're gone. They're going to get dissolved. So these big companies buy these smaller companies, and then most of the people there lose their jobs, and the big companies just sort of keep the assets that they want from the companies that they purchase. And ultimately, those companies that we love, Activision, or not that we love Activision, but, you know, like an Activision or a Bandcamp, eventually they will just dissolve and become part of that company. You know what I mean? So like, the fact that we're seeing everything get bought up and gobbled up is just, it's really disheartening and sad. This also brings up the question of maybe wanting to unionize in the video game industry. We don't see it a lot in the video game industry, and I feel like it's something we desperately need. And it's not just because of this Epic Games layoff. It's because of all of the layoffs we have seen during all of the profit highs of these companies. They get these profit highs after they release these huge games, and then they fire everybody. And this is why I think unions in video games would be huge, and they would save a lot of people's jobs and create a lot of job security for people, I think. And you know, this actually leads right into our next piece of news here. SAG-AFTRA members vote yes to authorize video game strike. This also comes from Wesley LeBlanc over at Game Informer. SAG-AFTRA union members have voted yes to authorize a video game strike. It did so with a 98.72% vote in favor of authorizing a strike on the interactive media agreement that covers its members' work in the game industry. In total, 34,687 members cast ballots, which represents 27.47% of eligible voters. SAG-AFTRA writes in a press release. This vote does not mean SAG-AFTRA is striking, but gives the union leverage in its ongoing negotiations and, if needed, allows the union to begin a strike immediately. The union hopes this strike authorization will work as added leverage, compelling the companies it is bargaining with to make significant movement on critical issues where we are still far apart. As for why, SAG-AFTRA has been in interactive media agreement negotiations with signatory video game companies, including Activision Productions Inc., Disney Character Voices Inc., Electronic Arts Productions Inc., Insomniac Games Inc., Epic Games, Take-Two Productions, WB Games Inc., and more since October of last year. SAG-AFTRA says, throughout the negotiations, the companies have refused to offer acceptable terms on some of the issues most critical to our members, including wages that keep up with inflation, protections around exploitative uses of artificial intelligence, and basic safety precautions. Quote, it's time for the video game companies to stop playing games and get serious about reaching an agreement on this contract, SAG-AFTRA President Fran Drescher writes in a press release. The result of the vote shows our members understand the existential nature of these negotiations and that the time is now for these companies, which are making billions of dollars and paying CEOs lavishly, to give our performers an agreement that keeps performing in video games as a viable career. SAG-AFTRA National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator Duncan Crabtree says, it has become clear to the union after 5 rounds of bargaining that video game companies aren't willing to meaningfully engage on critical issues like compensation undercut by inflation, unregulated use of AI, and safety. Quote, I remain hopeful that we will be able to reach an agreement that meets members' needs, but our members are done being exploited, and if these corporations aren't willing to offer a fair deal, our next stop will be at the picket lines. Between the exploitative uses of AI and lagging wages, those who work in video games are facing many of the same issues as those who work in film and television, says Chief Contracts Officer Ray Rodriguez. This strike authorization makes an emphatic statement that we must reach an agreement that will fairly compensate these talented performers, provide common sense safety measures, and allow them to work with dignity. Our members' livelihoods depend on it. There is an update here. Earlier this week, SAG-AFTRA union members voted yes to authorize a video game strike. However, the union said it is not striking. Rather, this strike authorization gave it more leverage at its next bargaining table session, where it would try to strike a new interactive media agreement contract with the producers and employers. That negotiation session ended yesterday, and SAG-AFTRA and video game employers released a joint statement stating negotiation has concluded, but no deal was reached. Here's the joint statement sent to Game Informer in full. SAG-AFTRA and video game employers conclude a scheduled negotiation for the interactive media agreement. No deal was reached, and the current agreement will remain in effect while the parties make final efforts to reach a deal. Despite not making a deal, SAG-AFTRA has not announced a strike yet. So yeah, obviously SAG-AFTRA is currently striking with the film and television division. It's no surprise that they're starting to ask questions about what's going on over in video games. Why aren't they getting paid? And this is kind of the question in all of video games. The big CEOs make billions of dollars. Well, actors, animators, everybody else makes nothing. The people who actually make the products make no money. Well, the big bosses at top make all the money. And I think it's great that unions are starting to get involved in video games, and we're starting to see this sort of take over. You can see with the writer's strike that ended last week as well, unions work most of the time. Not every time, but unions do work. The writers made a huge deal last week, and if you want more information on that, go to that. It's not video game news, so I'm not going to talk about it here. I could if you want. Leave a comment down below if you want me to talk about it, but the writers made out huge last week after, I think it was like 6 months of striking. But after 6 months of striking, they made an amazing deal that protects a lot of the writers. It creates more job opportunities for the writers. It creates protections for the writers. It allows writers to receive residuals from products that they have written and made in the future. Not only does this help the current writers, this helps every writer in the future going forward. So a strike like this, which I think is inevitable that we will see a SAG-AFTRA strike in the video game division, creates big change and creates a better environment for everyone involved. And I know the CEOs are going to complain about it because they're going to make less money, but ultimately they might not make less money because they might be making better products because they're going to have better employees. Here's the thing. When you pay your employees well, they're going to have much better output. And that is just the bottom line. And I think we're going to see it in the next few months with the writers. I think the writers are going to start making some of the best content we've ever seen. Granted, we're still waiting for the SAG-AFTRA strike to end, and we can't really see any new products come out until that ends. But I'm a firm believer that if you pay your employees well, you will create more revenue. Now, you may need to take a pay cut, but this protects the company more overall. I think it gives companies more longevity because once you're just paying a CEO billions and billions of dollars and you're cutting out all of the people who actually make the product suffers for it and people stop buying the product. And when people stop buying the product, Xbox comes in and buys that product, and then you just kind of disappear forever. And that's what happens without unions. Without unions, Xbox owns everybody. And look, Xbox owns everybody. So I'm hoping to see more unions show up in the video game sphere. Let's get unions made for animators. Let's get unions made for game developers. It's great. I think it's wonderful. Gives the working class more leverage. There was one more big piece of news that happened last year, and that is that PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan is retiring in 2024. This comes from George Yang over at GameSpot. Sony has announced that PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan is stepping down from his role and will retire in March 2024. Hiroki Totoki will become the chairman of Sony Interactive Entertainment in October 2023, then take over as company's interim CEO on April 1st, when Ryan officially retires. Quote, after 30 years, I have made the decision to retire from SIE in March 2024. I've relished the opportunity to have a job I love in a very special company, working with great people and incredible partners, Ryan said in a statement. Totoki added, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Jim Ryan for his outstanding achievements and contributions over his 30-year career at Sony, including the great success of launching the PlayStation 5. So let's talk about Jim Ryan. Jim Ryan became the CEO of SIE back in April of 2019. Jim Ryan has been riding the high of the success of the PlayStation 4. He took over when PlayStation was the top dog. And personally, I think he's been pretty bad at his job. His contributions to PlayStation, in my opinion, have done nothing but hurt the brand. Obviously, PlayStation is still at the top, but I think that has a lot to do with the goodwill of all the previous iterations of the PlayStation. I think the PlayStation 5 is the top-selling console because people are already part of that PlayStation 4 ecosystem, which just leads right into the PS5 ecosystem. Now, we can make arguments that it's selling faster than the PlayStation 4 ever did, and the reason it's not selling as quickly as the PS4 is because of supply chain shortages, which may be true, but I still think that just comes down to the success of the PS4. The PS4 was so successful that it had just a constant curve of sales and sales and sales, and that just led right into the PS5. What has Jim Ryan given us? Jim Ryan has given us Activision Blizzard nonsense. He's been fighting about it nonstop, which I don't totally think he's in the wrong for doing. But Jim Ryan just had this way about him of sticking his foot in his goddamn mouth. I remember after there were lots of talks about abortion bans in America. A lot of the employees were upset about this, and we're talking amongst each other about this. And Jim Ryan sent out a mass email saying, we shouldn't talk about politics at work, and also here's a picture of my cats. And it was just sort of a weird sort of thing to do as a CEO. Just super weird. Not to mention every time Jim Ryan shows up in one of those state of plays or something and is talking in front of a camera, he just has no charisma at all. Compared to someone like a Sean Layden, who also was not perfect, or like a Reggie Fils-Aimé over at Nintendo. Jim Ryan just didn't have that sort of charisma to promote his console. Not that a CEO really needs that, but I think in this industry, that is part of the deal. Now, what else has Jim Ryan done? He's given us state of plays, which I think have all been pretty bad for the most part. He's gotten rid of the big press conferences, which I think without those, we've gotten more and more of these shitty state of plays. We have a very uncertain future for 2024. We have no idea what's coming out next year. And normally by now, we would know what is coming in the next few months. We know Spider-Man's coming out. That's it. That's all we know right now. And that's kind of a bad thing. And I think part of the reason we don't know what's coming out in the coming future is because Jim Ryan has been busy gobbling up companies. He's been competing with Phil Spencer on trying to buy as many companies as possible. He bought Housemarque. It was a good purchase, but he bought Housemarque. He bought Insomniac. It was a good purchase, but he bought Insomniac. He bought Bungie. I'm not going to say that was a good purchase. That's a weird purchase, in my opinion. And that also goes along with Jim Ryan pivoting into live service games. This is something he's talked about more and more, that he has been working extensively on making more live service games. And Bungie, the purchase of Bungie, was a big part of that business move. I feel like this is part of the reason we don't know what's coming out in 2024, because I think a lot of game companies like Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch have tried to fit into that mold that Jim Ryan wanted of live service games, which has massively slowed the development of their other games. Now, this is all speculation, but it seems feasible. What's coming out for PlayStation? Is Jim Ryan retiring because he actually needs to retire, or is he retiring because the pivot into live service is not working out the way they had hoped? They haven't released a single live service game. They announced that they were doing this like 2 years ago. And I think they're starting to realize, like a lot of the rest of the gaming industry, that making a successful live service game is like finding a needle in the haystack. Destiny got lucky. Destiny was one of the first to do it. The Division got lucky because they were one of the first to do it. But you look at other games, you look at Avengers, look at that. Look what happened there. People don't have time for all of these games. And I think that's why people loved Sony. Sony released these beautiful artistic expressions in video games. We don't want live service games from PlayStation. Maybe one, but we don't need 30 like they announced. And I feel like this is a big part of why we don't know what's coming out in 2024, because I don't think Sony knows what's coming out in 2024. And I think Jim Ryan is saying, oh shit, I'm getting out before all of this blame is put onto my head. And it can all just be put onto Hiroki Totoki, who's going to take a lot of the blame for the shitty year that is next year. Because I guarantee PlayStation's going to have a shitty year next year. Now, if I'm wrong, I will eat my words. But look what happened with The Last of Us multiplayer. They bought Bungie, and Bungie said, nah, this game ain't gonna work. Who's Bungie to say to that? To fucking Naughty Dog. So that is my thoughts on Jim Ryan. All right, real quickly here at the end of the show, I just want to talk about some games I've been playing. I've been continuing my journey into Starfield. You know, I don't know if I'll ever beat Starfield, but it's relaxing, oddly. I feel like most of my time in Starfield is just managing my inventory, which is annoying, but I'm kind of growing to like it in a weird way. I'm kind of growing to like managing my inventory. I think the shooting is great in the game. I think it's a beautiful game. It's glitchy as all hell, but that's kind of part of the Bethesda charm, but it's also a beautiful game. It really is beautiful. And I actually like flying around in the game. I think the space combat is actually pretty good. I do wish you could fly to other planets, but honestly, it's not that bad. I wish the quick travel worked a little easier than it does. It's a lot of like go into a map to select where you're going, and then once you're there, select in the map again to go to the planet. Like it's very tedious unnecessarily. And then when you get to planets, there's no mini maps, which gets a little confusing as well. I would love some mini maps. I know there's some mods that have come out to help with this, but I'm not downloading mods. I don't have time for that. Also, last night, I did dabble in Foam Stars. Foam Stars has a beta on the PS5. It's over now, but it was over the weekend. And I remember at one of those PlayStation State of Plays, they showed off this game by Square Enix, Foam Stars. And I remember seeing it, and I was like, oh god, this looks like really bad Splatoon. And yeah, it kind of is bad Splatoon. So in Splatoon, it's more about painting the ground and getting the ground to match your color. This one is more, you know, your classic team deathmatch sort of gameplay. And I will say this game is not all bad. I think the frantic gameplay of it can be kind of exhilarating sometimes. I think surfing around on the foam is pretty fun. I think the idea of shooting foam on the ground and it like piles up and you can create like little hills to create barricades is interesting. But ultimately, I think the gameplay is just not very fun. For one, I think the hitboxes make no sense at all. You shoot foam and it'll hit the ground, and it takes half a second before the foam actually shows up on the ground. You can pile up foam, but when it decides to pile up just seems to be random, totally random. As well as the hero shooter aspects of it, I think are going to limit this game in a big way. I think it's going to turn into a sort of Overwatch thing, which, you know, a lot of people might argue is a good thing, but I think it's just going to limit a more broad audience. I think it would be a lot more interesting if you could like create your own character and then sort of create your own subclasses like you can in Splatoon. But ultimately, I think the game is just frustratingly bad. It doesn't play the way you want it to play. It kind of plays exactly how it looks. Like, look at this guy. Like, he's shooting the ground and the foam doesn't change. Look, he's like piling. Like, it just doesn't feel good. And like when you're shooting like this guy, he's shooting his foam up in the air, and you would think like little drizzles of the foam would also like hit the ground in front of him, and that just doesn't happen. Yeah, the shooting mechanics just don't feel good in this game. So yeah, that's kind of my review of Foam Stars. Not a huge fan. I think the music is wonderful. The music rules in the game. I think it's like a good looking game. It doesn't like look bad. I do think the characters are pretty generic though. But ultimately, I don't see that going well for Square Enix. And that's unfortunate because that's definitely not an L that Square Enix needs right now. Square Enix has been taking a lot of L's recently, and it sucks. That's just another one to add to the list. All right, next week in games. Here are the games coming out next week. On October 2nd, we've got Bilkin's Folly coming to PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Switch, and PC. Disgaea 7 is coming to PS5, PS4, Switch, and PC on October 3rd. Scorn is coming to PlayStation 5 on October 3rd. Silent Hope is coming to Switch and PC on October 3rd. Blossom Tales 2, The Minotaur Prince, is coming to Xbox Series and Xbox One on October 4th. Assassin's Creed Mirage is coming to everything except for the Switch on October 5th. Front Mission 2 Remake is coming to Switch on October 5th. The Dark Pictures Anthology Little Hope is coming to Switch on October 5th. Wargroove 2 is coming to Switch and PC October 5th. Borderlands 3 is coming to Switch on October 6th. Oh boy, I can't imagine that running well. Detective Pikachu Returns comes to Switch on October 6th, and NHL 24 is coming to everything except for the Switch on October 6th. Well, thank you very much for watching the show. I've noticed an uptick in views lately, and I really, really appreciate it. You know, I don't make this show for views. It's quite obvious that I don't make this show for views. You can see how long I've been doing this show with very little views. I do this show because I love talking about video games, and that is the whole reason I made this channel. I'm a loner who doesn't have a lot of people to talk about this stuff with, so I go to the internet to talk about it. And if someone else out there enjoys it, that's just a plus for me. So if you did enjoy this, I would really appreciate if you subscribed and left a comment. Like, let's interact, man. I stream all the time too, so come check out some of the streams. I stream on Twitch and YouTube. You can check me out on twitch.tv/lonercast. We're always hanging out over there. Come in, and even if I'm playing like Ratchet and Clank or something, come talk about video game news, dude. I'm down to talk about it whenever. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And I'll see you next week.